This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Waco 175th Celebration Series presents Spirited Women of Waco, hosted by Ann Harder.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Waco 175 Celebration. We are marking the 175th anniversary of the founding of the city of Waco, and we're doing it with a limited series of podcasts called Spirited Women of Waco.
Yeah, this has been fun to think of some of the great women in Waco's history, which there's an abundance.
Well, and of course you, Dr. Stephan Sloan, an expert on history. In fact, one of your
But not women.
Well, when I contacted you, because I thought who better to talk about Waco history and important women from the history of the city of Waco, you immediately came out with a couple of names that we're going to talk about, and we're going to show you their pictures, and you'll get to learn a little bit more about these two ladies that I was not familiar with, and I'm ashamed to say that. But in the coming podcasts, we're going to be talking about other important women in the life of the city of Waco, the Hoffman sisters, for example, Nell Pape, who... Nell Pape Garden Center, Bobby Barnes, of course, she kind of put Waco history on the map, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, she did. With
and Hallie Earl, so some of the ladies we're going to be talking about, Stephen. But first of all, you have, of course, an app on Waco history. And you have a very, very popular Waco history podcast. And so I guess you've had the opportunity to kind of look back and see, the achievements of women through Waco's history.
Yeah, it's amazing. And of course, women haven't gotten the attention for most of Waco's history. Most of those 175 years, they didn't get the attention they deserved and didn't necessarily have the same opportunities that men had. But there are so many that we'll talk about that made the most out of the opportunities that they did have.
Well, absolutely. And so let's just jump right in because you immediately sent back two names, Jeffy Connor and Eileen Jeans.
Yeah, I picked these on purpose because I tried to pick two that I thought most people would not be familiar with. Yeah. So I'm glad you were not familiar with them. And the first one is Jeffy Connor, an African-American woman who made a really big impact in Waco. Her family originally is from Harrison. So Harrison, this community about 8 miles south of Waco. Harrison was a plantation, which then became a predominantly African-American community after the Civil War. And what was unusual about that community and unusual about the time of Jeffy's parents is they owned their land. So there were black farmers that owned and worked their own land when most were sharecropping at the time. But she was the oldest of 3 children born to her family. Harrison Switch is what it was called, and it becomes known.
No, I have heard Harrison Switch.
Yeah, so referred to as Harrison later on is the same community. But very bright as a young woman. And in 1914, she graduates from Prairie View Normal School, which today we would know as Prairie View A&M. And she gets a teaching certificate, and she immediately goes into teaching. And teaching as you probably know, segregated at schools at the time. So she's teaching in black schools all over McLennan County, and that's how she's supporting herself. In 1923, she marries a very prominent doctor, African-American doctor in town, George Connor. And they build a house together over on 12th Street. And the house is still there. Dr. Ken Haferteep, who's a mutual friend, who's written some great books in recent years on Waco houses, highlights the history of the Connor house. I'll tell you one little story about the Connor house. One spirited woman that stays in the Connor house is Marian Anderson. Marian Anderson, the contralto
opera singer,
opera singer, so very famous.
Stayed there.
Yeah, so she's invited by A.J. Armstrong of Armstrong Browning Library in 1939 to give a concert at Baylor, but she comes to the segregated South, and there's very limited places that Marian Anderson can stay, even though she's an international superstar.
I mean, huge.
And so the Connors host her there at their home on 12th Street.
That's an interesting story.
Yeah. But a very interesting individual. She eventually leaves her job as a teacher, and she becomes a home demonstration agent. And folks may not be familiar with what I mean.
Kind of like the county extension office.
Yes, that would be what it would be similar to today. And she primarily worked with the Black population in the rural areas, going around and teaching better ways of preservation, better ways of sanitation, the variety of ways in which there were modern approaches to
canning food and
all the things that they could take advantage of, but they may not necessarily have the knowledge of that new technology. This was a demonstration program that had founded in 1912, and so the program's not that old, and she's one of the early agents there. But because of segregation, she can only work with Black women. She can only work with Black families, but that did not slow her down. She drew on her own farm experience. She drew on her teaching experience and made a real big impact going around and working in these rural communities. Due to her influence, rural schools switched from a shared ladle to individual drinking cups. You can think of little things, education about germs and disease. So she traveled throughout McLennan County doing this sort of work. And often she was only back in Waco on the weekends, and during the week she was out in the county doing her work. She returned to Prairie View. She got her bachelor's degree in home economics in 1939, and then she was promoted to a supervisor. So she was supervising home demonstration agents, and so she became in charge of all Central Texas at that point. So she raised her profile and was seen as a real leader in this area.
I was going to say probably not too many supervisors, female Black supervisors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a very prominent person. Eventually, she leaves the demonstration service and she becomes superintendent of all the Black schools in town. And so that period where Black schools, we all know that separate was never equal. And so she was leading that fight for Black schools to get the resources and facilities and the funding that they needed. And so she was a lead person in making that fight in the 40s and 50s.
Wow.
And very, very inspirational individual. Her husband passes away. Her husband, who was a physician, Dr. Connor, passed away in 1939, I believe. And it's in the 40s that she leaves this position of a demonstration agent but to become supervisor of Black schools. And she retires in 1952, but receives state recognition. She's on some state commissions because of her expertise and her experience. And she is really a spirited woman and an impressive example of civil service early on, really in the early 20th to mid 20th McLennan County history.
Yeah, you wonder how many lives she impacted just from a health standpoint.
Yeah, we don't know. And it's the science that she was bringing to some of these areas really revolutionized life.
Oh, that's awesome. She's amazing. You mentioned the Spirited Women of Waco, so we'll just take a quick little detour. The reason we're doing this is really based on this book, A Spirit So Rare, by the wonderful Patricia Ward Wallace, who is now deceased. I'm sorry to say, because she would be perfect for this podcast. But yeah, she has done so much in her life, in her work and her scholarship in preserving Waco history. And so this is a little bit of a dedication to Dr. Wallace.
And if you want to pick that book up, I know Historic Waco has copies of Dr. Wallace's book, who was my thesis director at Baylor.
I knew you knew him. So I knew her. I
know Dr. Wallace. Dr. Wallace well.
Yeah. So just I don't know, talk about a spirited Waco woman. She was just a few comments about your recollections.
I mean, she's a bit of a groundbreaker herself.
Yes,
she was one of the first female faculty in the history department at Baylor. And an all-male department for the most part. But she was a productive scholar, excellent teacher. She knew her stuff. One little story I will tell about her that I thought was really interesting is every now and then she would take the GRE again, and I would ask her,
What?
this is the graduate entrance exam
Yeah.
that you would take. And she would just do it to make sure
She was still sharp.
She was still sharp. But I loved having her in class. I still have her notes. I still refer to her notes. And the fact that I got to come back to Baylor in 2007 and have her as a colleague for a few years there was really an honor of mine. But she has several books on Waco history that I can't recommend enough. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and we thank her for being the inspiration for this podcast. So speaking of scholarships and scholarship and, just a brilliant mind, Aline Jeans was born in Waco.
Yes, so Aline Jeans was born in Waco. She goes to Baylor University, so she's a graduate of Baylor. She gets a chemistry degree from Baylor in 1929. She goes on to get her master's degree at UC Berkeley and then returns to Texas to teach high school. And then she goes into higher education as a first step. She becomes the head of the Department of Science for a college in Alabama. She teaches chemistry, physics, and biology. She does that in the 1930s. But then she makes her impact when she goes back and decides to get a doctorate in organic chemistry in the 1930s, which was fairly unusual for women during that period. After she leaves there, she joins Agricultural Research Station in Peoria, Illinois. And you may say, well, why are we talking about her? It is there in her long career there, she's going to make some significant discoveries that save lives, again, that thread, and also creates some additives to food that are extremely important that are in. If you go to your fridge right now, I'm going to mention it in a minute. You can turn around and look at the ingredient label, and you probably have xanthan gum in whatever you're eating.
I've seen that.
It's an additive that she'll discover in her lab. But the biggest contribution that she makes early on, and it's important in the timing of it, is her work on dextran. So dextran is a substance that causes the thickening of liquid. It is a bacteria, and so that was primarily her area of study, is these bacteria studies. And she was studying all these different types of bacteria, and what it does is it thickens liquid. And you say, well, why is that a big deal? Well, first I'll tell you how she discovers it, and then I'll tell you why it's a big deal. And when she was working at NRRL, which is the Northern Regional Research Center, this is in a USDA research center in Illinois, someone sent her some contaminated root beer. This root beer had gone bad, and the root beer had gone bad because bacteria had formed in the root beer, and it had become thick. It had become really thick. And what she discovered is through fermentation, this dextran had been produced in this liquid. And she discovered through that a cheap way to replicate and produce dextran. And this is about the time of the Korean War. And why this is groundbreaking and life-saving is this dextran becomes used during the war and after. If anyone is experiencing massive blood loss, they can administer dextran to them, and it thickens the blood and slows blood loss. And so it saves lives during Korea. It saves lives with applications after Korea because of the ways dextran can be used. There was ideas of this earlier, but there wasn't a way to synthesize and produce it. And so Aline Jeans comes up with that way to synthesize and produce it and saves who knows how many lives. And so Korean War breaks out in 1950, timed about the time she makes this discovery, and it's a big impact.
That's remarkable. Remarkable. So she was born in Waco, but did she, other than going to Baylor and then went on, so she never lived in Waco again?
She never lived in Waco again, never married. She was someone who was so committed to her research that she never married, spent a lifetime doing research out of that same lab. The other discovery that she makes that I mentioned earlier is xanthan gum.
Now that sounds to me like it would be a
thickener. Particularly if you look in your in your salad dressings. They probably have xanthan,
okay.
and it creates a thickening. And one reason why it's really important now, it's a favorite substance for vegans or people that are gluten-free, because it is what provides the binding and moist agent that bread or that substance wouldn't have if xanthan gum wasn't in it.
I was going to say, often gluten-free bread products particularly can be dry.
Mm-hmm. So xanthan gum is what keeps it moist, okay, and binds it together. It's safe, it's edible, and it's time-tested, and so it's something that's used globally now.
And a lot of people hear additive and they go, oh, it must be bad. Bad.
No, it finds all sorts of applications, as many of these products, they continue to find new applications.
Well, I know people who have swallowing issues.
Mm-hmm.
They sometimes have to have thickening things added to their foods, so it's easier for them to swallow.
Yeah, and so this science that she's discovering help people do that. She receives a Distinguished Service Award from the USDA. She's the first woman to receive that in the 50s. I've got a great picture of her in the Kennedy Oval Office. She receives a Federal Women's Award. She receives a award from the American Chemical Society. She's even, just a few years ago, was placed in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. And
really?
so, she's a remarkable woman. You said that she come back to Waco. She's interred at Oakwood Cemetery, so her permanent home is here in Waco. But she's an amazing woman that, in her brilliant mind and her spirit of invention, had a huge impact on science.
Mm-hmm. So her family, she was born here, so I presume she still had family here?
Yeah, she still had family here, and I haven't done as much research into her
extended family. Because I knew some Jeans spelled that way.
Yeah.
Harry Jeans was first federal bank, you know.
Yeah.
So
so that
so I wonder
could
if
likely
there's
be
some
connected.
relation.
Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe, but a remarkable woman, Dr. Jeans.
Well, you are remarkable for bringing these two wonderful women up so we can share with our audience. You and I are both involved with the fledgling Jacob de Cordova Society.
Yes.
I say fledgling, it just got started that I know like about in January. Pretty fresh, pretty new, but heavily involved in the celebration of Waco's 175th anniversary, and already had some events and things that are exciting. Some wonderful events are coming up.
Yes.
And let's go ahead and start with the one you're really involved with, and that is a scavenger hunt on September 7th.
Yes, so September 7th, you can't sign up for it yet, but go ahead and mark your calendar for this event. It's really a lot of fun. We're going to do a Waco's Founding History Scavenger Hunt on the morning of September 7th. So we'll start at the Farmers Market in downtown Waco, and you're going to be scouring the historical landscape of Waco for clues and to solve missions and end up somewhere for a grand party kind of celebrating Waco's history. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. Teams can participate. We've done a version of this before. Classes showed up to do it. Instructors in classes.
Involved somewhat. Yeah.
My students will be involved at some of the sites to give clues and help folks along their way. But it really is a lot of fun. It'll be a great event. And so September
what ages
7th,
are we talking?
Any age.
Okay.
Any age can come and participate.
Family project,
Be a great family project. We had homeschool groups participate last time. Folks from any age can participate, and you will learn something. You will learn something if you come and participate, and you'll have fun.
Well, that's the bottom line. We're looking for sponsors.
Yes.
Starting at $500 and up to $5,000. And the day before, on the 6th of September, is kind of a kickoff event that's going to be at the Texas Music Cafe. And really going to be a fun, just kind of an evening kickoff social, but there's going to be music, there's going to be food, there's going to just kind of a fun atmosphere there. But we will have, I'm going to find her name, our wonderful singer-songwriter who has done a song called Waco, A City to Believe In, Kelsey Ray.
Yeah, fantastic.
And she performed it right around, I guess, March 2nd, when we sort of had a little kickoff thing this past March 2nd. But we're celebrating the whole year. We're going to take it from March 1 to March 1.
I mean, 175 years is something.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, you got to throw a party for that.
Yeah, you see banners around town, and that's been fun. And of course, all this is just another great way to collaborate with folks who have helped and will continue to be helping. Of course, the Waco History and Historic Waco Foundation are big parts of this. And so I've got some other sponsors. We know Rogue Media Network. Thank you very much, Mike Hamilton at Rogue Media, Creative Waco, the Waco Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Texas Jewish Historical Society, which will be holding their kind of annual meeting at about the same time, I believe. Yeah. So it's a fun collaboration there, and Waco Educators Alliance, and of course the Jacob de Cordova Society. Do you want to talk a little bit about Jacob de Cordova?
Yeah, so I mean, you're going to learn more about him as we go throughout the year, but really important as the father of Waco in kind of providing the land that the town is laid out on, and so his story is integrally connected to the founding of Waco. There's no 175th without Jacob de Cordova. So it's so great to have this society in place as a partner to celebrate this year.
He had a vision for plotting out the city as we are here on the 21st floor of the Attico building. You can look out and see it. But he called the city of Waco My Beautiful Daughter. Yeah. And that is the name of a film that is in production right now. And in November, there will be a premiere of that.
Have a screening of that.
And that's going to be just kind of the crown jewel, I think, of what's happening. But it's just indicative of other things that will be happening in the years to come. This is not just a 175th project. This is something we want to see recurring. We'd like to have a Waco History Day.
Yes.
More films about important people in Waco's past. I mean, it's endless, really.
There is an endless supply of characters and events and stories to talk about when it comes to Waco. So, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
Well, so many people to thank, but Jeff Aristide is here, and he is sitting behind the camera. But he is our friend who's moved to Waco within the last couple of years, jumped in with both feet, and is really kind of the driving force behind Jacob de Cordova Society and a lot of these things that we're telling you about today. And that's sort of the whole point of this, so you can put it on your calendar. I know it's a little bit early yet, but September 6th?
September 7th. 6th?
Well, the kickoff at Texas Music Cafe. Yeah. The 7th, and the 7th will start where?
We're going to start at the downtown farmers market.
Okay.
And you'll see opportunities to register and sign up to participate in the hunt. There'll be prizes. Local businesses are going to donate prize baskets to those that participate. So you'll see. Go ahead and mark your calendar, but you'll see advertisements about it.
Well, and if you'd like to volunteer, I'm sure we can always use volunteers.
We can definitely use volunteers. Let us know. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sloan. You are awesome. You were so much fun. And thank you for all the work you do in preserving Waco history. And thank you for being with us. And we'll see you next time.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.